doesn't want to listen to. But other thoughts, I mean, it's discrimination, isn't it? It's other thoughts are, are interesting, but it's the personal identification thoughts that are problematic, possibly. But other thoughts.
This is one difficulty I'm having at the moment. How? Because you can say there's an activity of thinking, which is just implying the whole spectrum of thinking, right? Like personalization, imagination, sociabilization, concept, person thought, So there's a whole spectrum in the activity of thinking. And you can say this is the activity of thinking, or you can start to say, okay, but this is this, this is this. And when you start to say like, okay, but this is not a problem, this part of the spectrum is a problem, this one is good, this one, you start to enter into something different. It's like saying there is a field of vision, but after there is color. So yellow is kind of good, but yellow doesn't exist because it's a mix of red or whatever. And so, it's a little bit more confusing, I feel. Even if I completely understand
in the beginning, you
what
need
you're
to
pointing to.
Yeah.
So so one of the things that I do is I say to people, look, at this point in your investigation, it's helpful to just recognize that 100% of your thoughts are bullshit, that none of them have any validity. They might be entertaining, but that's about it. Right? Later, we'll recognize that there are different kinds of thoughts, or that thoughts can have a different usage. But right at the moment, don't believe any thoughts. So it's a temporary thing, but it helps them to get out of their head, which is the major thing. Like, it's amazing how many people out there, so to speak, out there, if you know what I mean, think that they're relating to actual things when in fact they're relating to their idea about those things. And that's the big thing to break if in the beginning. Once they get the hang of that, then we can start to put things back together, and we can start to take notice of thoughts and differentiate between different kinds of thoughts. And of course, then when we do I put it in terms of we do a full 360 degrees, and then we get back to where thoughts can be really useful, and thoughts have a good place in our life. But in the beginning, don't believe any of them. They're all shit.
What I'm trying to do more, it's try to approach thought more as an activity, as an ongoing activity without beginning and end, just like a stream, That's why I'm speaking more about the activity of thinking. Like it's more like a verb, And because from my experience in that way, when I approach thought in that way, there is less trouble with it, because it's always changing, it's always moving, and there is no solidity there. So even if the thought appear like my life is a mess, if you take my life is a mess as a somehow some kind of one thought that is there, it kind of seems like it's difficult to move one thing that is somewhere in a place that I don't know what's happening. But if you see it's more like a stream, I feel it's easier. But maybe it's my own imagination.
When you relate to it in that way, you can almost feel it as and this isn't necessarily exactly right, but it's almost like an energy source that's kind of a different quality from everything else. And when you see it that way, it almost pulls it out, rather than being like, looking at every single thought. You actually kind of get this kind of ongoing energy stream, and then it's very easy to kind of pull that away from the rest of the experience, isn't it?
Exactly. It's exactly this, like an energy field, and after you put the energy field of perceiving or sensing just in the same place, and you feel that they are kind of moving together. They have different tastes, but everything is kind of moving. And that way it's more easy from my perspective, kind of explore after what we do specifically in LU, which is this self. Because if everything is moving, it can become very obvious that in all of the field of your experience, there is no solidity for a self to get roots on whatever field you are, because it's too shifting, it's too moving, it's too vibrating everywhere.
One of the skills that people develop, I think, is to change their perspective on thoughts rather than looking from the inside of a thought, from the perspective of the content of the thought. They can step out of that thought and look back at it or look sideways at it. And so there's an objectification of thinking that goes on. We develop a whole new way of thinking, which we add to, where we can notice what we're thinking rather than simply express what the thought is about. And that's what I call being lost in thought, when we're simply expressing what the content is. And it's interesting, and this is a paradox, it keeps coming to me. But when we are fully immersed in the content of a thought and we're just expressing that thought, there's no self involved. There's no idea of a self. Seems paradoxical, but yeah, we're just lost in the content of the thought. And it can be, you could say it's because of a belief in self that we do that. But there is no experience of a self. There is just the experience of whatever the content of the thought is about.
Which includes the me, eh?
Well, it is an expression of that.
Yeah. But the content, the fact that the me is just a thought.
Mm. Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Mm.
We say it's just a thought. Oh, it causes a few problems for just being a thought, doesn't it?
I had actually quite an interesting experience with you, and it came upon me. Well, I was reading something, and I think in a thread or somewhere, and there was a question about, who do you think you are, or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And I realized that in my body, it wasn't the question, it wasn't the content of the question, but it was the way the body received this you. What do you think? And there was a huge fear response to being to this, I don't know, I suppose the you, me, sort of like a type of caught together, somebody and pointing and you, and I traced it eventually, because I just sort of sat with this and saying, this is so weird. This, there's no me, no me, but there's this charge on a you, and it was the sort of the aggression coming from another. Of course, it was in the end, it was my mother, a mother base, and I sort of traced it down to an event in childhood when I had to have my tonsils out, and I think I was 5, and she was talking to the doctor, and she said, "Oh, well, somebody's got a cold." And the doctor said, "Oh, that's all right. We can still do the operation." And I guess I was sort of pulled off to have to go into the hospital and have it. But it was this sort of gaslighting of, there was a huge sort of gaslighting that of being referred to as somebody, and there was this you, and a sort of expression of grief came out at the end of the exploration of all this charge of feeling very intimidated by this word. And it just came out of the blue. I mean, it had never come to me before, that there was something associated with the word you. So I just wanted to share that, how these things can all of a sudden just appear to be somehow seen and processed.
What you point out is very interesting, because from the point of view of the mind, often the mind think about itself like a me, right? I am this, I am that. But sometimes it say like, oh, you are like this, you are like this, you did this, you did. So from the place of the mind, it speaks sometimes in a me, sometimes in a you. And for the body is the same. Sometimes you are the body, like I was, there was an accident, I was flying, and sometimes you have a body, my arm, my leg, my head was this. So it's the same mixed up.
Yeah, because we also, as a
the same
child,
confusion.
yeah, as a child, we absorb other voices. There's the voice ecosystem of absorbing, and so then the you becomes a voice sort of hidden, but because then it gets transferred to a belief, hidden. But when the you comes out and sort of like you, then it comes into the sort of the belief of oh, I've done something wrong type of thing, or I don't exist, or so yes, it's just taken on board without any discrimination.
The thoughts that run around
Because
here is that objectification that happens is that, it invites a sense of alienation and rejection and abandonment, even. Yes. It's interesting how as we go through this stuff, we often refer to ourselves in the third person more than we ever used to. This body, this kind of thing. Oh, well, that was exciting, wasn't it? Everybody went quiet.
Thoughtful.
Don't you ever refer to yourself in the third person these days?
Who? Who are you asking?
Anybody, everybody.
I see.
I still do. If there's like a moment where I've done something that is like I perceive as stupid, then instead of being like I'm stupid, there's like a narrative is like you idiot. It's very it's like yeah, and then it's like it's someone else's voice. It was like calling, the imaginary you an idiot. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, as we talk about voice, you can do some experiment. It's very, very interesting. Because often, like when you speak with someone, and it's better if it's live, right? Physically is there and he's speaking to you. And you disentangle yourself for whatever discussion, whatever's happening. Don't like you say, okay, he will speak and I will just accept that I will not listen whatever he say, okay? And I will just try to answer, it doesn't matter, and try to really see that where does the sound come from? It seems to come from the mouth out there, but where does this really come from? And after you can also see where is the meaning, right? Because if this person was speaking Chinese or whatever language that I don't speak, it wouldn't affect me because I have absolutely no idea what the meaning of it. So somehow there is this actual sound and there's the meaning of it. So even if I don't want to really dissolve the sound where it comes from, but if you take just the meaning, it's very interesting. The meaning is not in the person. The meaning it's literally in you. You put the meaning in the sound that you are hearing. So all the voice that we hear since childhood is our voice. That's why sometimes you say me, sometimes you say you, because it's the same mechanism, it's the same source that just put meaning everywhere and describe sound. And the voice that I am hearing right now is not the sound, it's not the sound that is speaking out there. And the meaning is the same. The meaning that I believe I'm sending to you has nothing to do with what is actually going out. So it's very a closed system.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. But when I do this after my partner especially say that I'm not listening, and it's true.
I've had the experience a few times on psychedelics where even people speaking English, it's just noises now. It's absolutely fascinating. It's just sounds, and it's so bizarre. It's like all the meaning leaves, and you're just kind of left like, wow. I had a really interesting story about a lady who went and lived abroad for a bit, and she said it was such a relief because she'd sit on the train and she wouldn't be able to understand anything anyone was saying. And it was like being in a little private bubble because you're not constantly analyzing other people's conversations and worrying about their lives and accidentally getting involved in all that stuff. You're just kind of left in this peaceful noise kind of bubble. It was really interesting.
Yeah. I'm fascinated with the sound of somebody speaking Chinese. The enthusiasm that they seem to have in their voice, and the musical quality of that sound. Even though I've got no idea what they're saying, I just love the sound of it. Yeah, it's like I'd love to be able to speak it, to be able to emulate that, to do the sounds that they make. The intonation is fascinating. Yeah.
And
But go on.
no, I want to precise that I'm not encouraging people to dissect to dissolve the meaning, and so after you cannot hear anyone and you're just like a zombie. This is not the intention of the exploration. I think what is very interesting in this exploration is to see that when I'm emotionally triggered by someone speaking, I'm not emotionally triggered by whatever the people is saying. I'm
Mm,
emotionally triggered because of my own interpretation of whatever
yeah.
they're saying. And
Mm,
this is where it's very, very interesting part of this
yeah.
of this exploration.
There's another interesting one that comes to mind, and that is that we absolutely amazingly we can recognize who is talking to us even after years of not hearing their voice. When we hear their voice, we can know exactly who it is straight away. There's this amazing identification process that's attached to the sound of somebody's voice. More so. And I don't know if it's associated with people that are experiencing dementia, will respond to music from their past, with a flood of memory. They'll be immediately back in some memory to do with when they were hearing that music the first time. So there's an amazing process, I guess, of association that happens with sound, that we tend to not put much emphasis on, but it is absolutely fascinating. I mean, how can everybody in the world, however many billions of people there are in the world, everybody has a different voice? a different sound. And we can distinguish them. It's like those colonies of birds where, you know, there's 10,000 birds and the mother will know exactly where a chick is in the midst of the cacophony of sound of all of the chicks calling out for their mothers. And that a mother will know her chick in the middle of all of that sound by the sound. Amazing. Mind-boggling.
Also, yes, it is. Also, post-puberty, the voice doesn't really change over time. It really tends to remain the same for decades and decades. And when somebody is 90, their voice sounds the same as when they were 30.
Mm. And so I wonder if I mean, to recognize that thoughts come in a variety of forms. So we have you know visual thoughts and so on, and I often refer to thoughts as verbal or textual thoughts, but really they're probably audible thoughts. And so I wonder if our thoughts come with the
So
the sound, yeah. And so maybe that might explain some of the belief in thoughts, because the sound is our own voice and we have a different relationship with our own voice than we do with another's voice. Maybe, I don't know. It's just an interesting possibility, that one.
Yeah,
It contributes to the sense of agency, the
and
identification with the voice. Go ahead.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. I was reading that people who hear multiple voices, who you know, that they're believing that other voices are living in them. I can't remember what that's called medically, but they're saying that there's something to do with the self-identification of the voice. The system is not functioning so well, so that they're thinking that they're hearing hallucinating voices. It's because of that mechanism you are referring to, Paul. They sort of being able to pinpoint areas. So it's
Yeah, the other voice is believed to be an agent with knowledge and the power to affect change. And the psychologist's role or psychiatrist's role is to show that that is not true, is to show that the voice has no knowledge, it has no power to do anything. Basically just pointing to the fact that the voice is just empty thoughts, which is very similar to the process of, in a way, LU or the emptiness teachings. In a way, you're pointing to the emptiness of thought, that thoughts don't have that subjective quality that people think they do. The Buddha said thoughts are objects. He meant that literally. People think he meant it figuratively. But thoughts have a subjective quality. There was some discussion earlier, Tom, and I think you were discussing it, that there's an energy associated with self-thoughts, self-critical thoughts, and that energy is used in a way to prove the authority of the thought. It's the me thought. That thought is really me because it has all this energetic movement with it. It's what gives the thought supposed authority, but when you keep looking at LU or any of the other places, keep looking at thought. And that's what the exercises are designed to do, is just separate that thought from that sensation that proves that that thought is true or that it has any content or anything else. So yeah, the voice is kind of a sticking point for that sense of agency, which is one of the things I try to work with sometimes in taking a thought and putting it up on a board and looking at it objectively, and then looking at the qualities of it. Objectify the thought literally, not just figuratively. But yeah, Vince, what you're talking about is the voice in the head seems a lot more real in terms of it being me rather than it just being thoughts in the head.
Yet there's this really interesting process that goes on as we travel down this road, and that is that the thoughts that we are believing because they're me are not our thoughts. They're thoughts we've taken on from external, right? And so in a way, we've got this double thing going, whereas we're giving authority to other people, and then with this process, we're kind of taking back the authority from society or whatever, and taking it for ourselves. But then we're throwing it out, throwing it in the rubbish bin.
Good
So there's that.
analogy.
It's an interesting process, isn't it? Yeah. The thoughts that we believe because they're me are not my thoughts. They're ones we've adopted.
Fun stuff.
Mm.
I think
Just
the good. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Rowena, you were talking about, I don't know if you were referring to what is it, like multiple personality disorder?
Yeah, I think that's it.
But what what just came to mind for me is like it, would it be would this I guess this process of seeing the self for what it is, would that be easier or harder for someone who experiences multiple personality? Like, do they already see these separate personalities that sometimes are them and sometimes aren't them?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
I
That's
guess, some of them are and some of them aren't.
You could
But
probably take a person who's been through that process and seen, because most of the time people are very successful with working with voices. You could probably take someone that the depersonalization process is what they do with the other voice, the other entity. It's a depersonalization process that I described. You could probably take it once. I don't think they're gonna automatically see through the illusion of their own self. They're just gonna come back and say, okay, well, I'm the real self here, and that voice was just a voice that it's not a real entity. You could probably take it one step further with them, though, that's been through the process and
from Paul,
take them through. Go
from
ahead.
what I've read and heard, it's not getting rid of other personalities. It's integrating them all in a system.
You could call it that. I mean, it's always the voice is always revealing an aspect of the personality that's trying to come out. So in a sense, what you're doing is integrating in a way, but you're seeing that it isn't somebody else. You'll probably have the recognition that it is a part of you and it's manifesting externally. For some reason, you kept it repressed. So yes, probably what you say is getting deeper into it is probably very accurate. It wouldn't be out there if it didn't have a reason, is what I'm saying.
I think what we are overlooking is the emotional part. That the people who are schizophrenic, they are often schizophrenic for a good reason, because they lived some very troubling and difficult event. So we are speaking like the emotional part is not even present, but for everyone it's mainly it's a big issue, all of this emotional part. So I think it's very simplistic to say to speak that way without taking account this emotional part and trauma and abuse and many of the things that are lying beyond this pathology.
Well, yeah, there usually is strong emotional content with it. That's why they show up at the doctor, because they say this, this voice of my brother who died very young in my life is coming back and criticizing me and telling me I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that right. And it's causing strong emotions in the people. That's why they seek out the help. But as she was saying, it's something that they're not actively dealing with, and that's why it tends to manifest externally. It's just I don't know, I guess you call it a coping mechanism, for lack of a better word.
But what is very interesting with schizophrenia, they had one patient that they did a lot of they did some studies with it, and one of the personality was seeing normally with the eyes, right? And another personality was blind. So when the other personality showed up, she couldn't see, and for a long time they thought that it was just a negation of the sight. But after they put like think of the brain there, and they found out that when the blind personality show up, the part of the brain which is dealing with sight don't just shut down completely. There was no activity in the sight brain, right? And when the other one come, which was sighting, the brain was functioning correctly. I think this is very, very interesting because it just shows that this belief that if you touch the brain, things happen and all of this, it's not as black and white as it seems. That's why often I speak the brain, it's a good map, but there is no real deep, clear, no one has proved a clear causality between thoughts and activity in the brain. Like no one have found like I don't know, like a banana thought in the where is located in the brain. So it's just mapping. It's a very good map. It can be useful, but to pretend that it is causal, it's a big leap. And this schizophrenia was a big example.
Okay, well, look, all of this stuff is really very interesting, and it is absolutely interesting. But I want to know who here is not awake and why are you not awake?
Well, I have a related question, if I can turn that binary awake, not awake into a maybe confusing spectrum. So recently noticed something that has been really interesting, but again, just seems to be showing me that I can have maybe partial clarity in one area and then realize, oh, nope, I was still completely confused about something else, which is realizing that there's a place to drop back into that stays here, from which it's much clearer that there's no doing. Things are just happening. And what's interesting is this is just the last couple of days, but before that, I feel like I was getting, for several months, increasingly clear ways of being able to see, okay, things are just appearing, they're happening on their own. That was experiential, but I think it was then a conceptual deduction from that, okay, that means I'm not doing anything. But this different perspective, place to drop back into, it's more experiential of, oh, okay, if I just stay right here, if awareness or attention stays right here, then everything is just appearing and it sort of normalizes everything else. So it's just, body, outside world, everything is just that which is appearing. And it's really interesting, and it's much more of a sense of, oh, okay, there's actually nothing I have to do, but it doesn't stick at all. What's fascinating is every second almost attention is trying to get sucked into the immediate next thought, like, oh, I have to think about what I'm going to say next. And then it's like, oh, wait, no, I don't. I can just stay here. That's just going to happen. And I'm curious to know, is that kind of how it will always be, of every moment having to come back to here? Or is there a point at which that becomes default, or it's easier to just kind of stay right here? And it seems like thoughts in particular pull attention away from here and kind of get sucked into that story.
Stay right here.
But yeah.
Yeah, good question. I can only tell you my experience, and I don't know that that's going to be relevant for you, but it may well be. And that is that, yeah, that's a temporary thing. You'll get over that. It's and it's like it'll come with the recognition that you're not doing the pulling back into being right here. When you consider it, where does the thought come that says, "Oh, I've lost that. I'm not here now. I'm off somewhere else." Where does that thought come from? That comes from you, and it's you just reminding you. And then the moment that thought appears, guess what? You're back here. You're back in the now.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it. It just happens because that thought just turns up spontaneously because you're cultivating that. So you will get better and better at it, and the point will come where it's not required. You'll just, but don't imagine that you'll always be in that place. It's just that's not being human. The human nature is that when you're talking with somebody else, you'll be so involved in the conversation that you won't recognize that you're in the present. You'll just, but you will also. You might afterwards recognize that you were not lost in thought, even though you were totally absorbed in the conversation. Or that's kind of a bit hard to put it right. But yeah, you'll recognize there was a different perspective, right? So when I think about what I'm saying now is I recognize that none of it's planned. I don't think about what I'm going to say. I don't formulate what I'm going to say before I say it. Just open my mouth and out it comes. That's the way it works.
Right. It's kind of like there's it's just this immersive 3D multisensory movie that's just happening, but it's happening one instantaneous moment at a time.
Yes.
And then I guess another question, and I know just speaking from your experience, it seems like so right now, recognition of staying here, it's I wouldn't say it's mutually exclusive with having attention and thought, but it's very much feels either or. What's happening is more and more, if I'm staying here or I'm able to stay here while things are happening, I'm seeing, oh, it just happens without thought. But I'm curious, it seems like, if I extrapolate, in your experience, does it end up being the case that you pretty much almost never need thought, and that turns out to have been mostly superfluous? Or I could see it converging where you can stay here even when thinking is happening and requiring a lot of attention, or maybe it's a bit of both.
Yeah, my response was that it's not a bit of both, that it's all of both. Yeah. I mean, I would have to say I can't actually remember the last useful thought I had. And I frequently ask myself, because it comes up here in this context all the time, what's going on with my thoughts? Am I thinking? Right. Well, I don't know. All I can say is I don't know. I kind of don't call them thoughts anymore, but there is a constant flow of impressions, and a lot of the time they're just in the background, and I'm not taking any conscious.
Yeah. It's not pulling your way from here.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So it's kind of like thoughts are not thoughts anymore. They're it's impossible to describe what I would call a thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. I certainly don't experience thoughts pulling me in a direction.
Yeah, maybe that's more the flavor of the distinction. It's, there's thoughts that are just appearances and they're in the background, or it's the same way there's a visual appearance or
yeah, exactly.
And then there's the thoughts that actually grab your attention and kind of pull you out of this. Maybe that happens less. That happens to me every couple of seconds. But that's that feels like a distinction. Like those are two different perspectives in the moment. It's interesting to what you were saying earlier of the idea that coming back to this, that I'm not doing that. I'd say from where I am right now, I can logically or conceptually deduce that that's the case, but there's still an experiential feeling or felt sense or identification of with, no, I'm the one pulling attention back. But what's interesting is there's this sort of double step of I'll catch myself of, oh, I was lost in thought. I need to not do that. That then feels like an efforting thing of I need to try effort to not be lost in thought, which is what it's been like for months. But now there can sometimes be this bigger shift back of, oh, no, I don't need to effortfully focus on now or effortfully not think. I just need to let go. Or just,
Well, even that's going too far. You don't need to let go. Right? So as an experiment, which is a kind of a tricky one here, but as an experiment, when next time it happens that you recognize that you're not here, so to speak, don't do anything. Just observe. And what you'll find is that the recognition does the job for you.
Okay.
So there's no, so and also recognize, just as an aside, that when the thought arises, oh, I shouldn't do that, or that's wrong, or anything like that, that's totally superfluous. That's the same as whipping yourself on the back with a bit of barbed wire. Why would you do that? You don't need to. Right? The simple recognition, which comes from nowhere. Where does it come from? You don't pull it up. You haven't programmed yourself to have that happen. It just happens because programming did happen, but nevertheless. So that recognition is all it takes, because even before the recognition arrives, that whole thing is dissolving and changing. Right? It's part of the same kind of process so the moment you say, oh, I'm not in the now, you are in the now.
Right. That's actually what happens first, and then commentary thoughts might try to appear to describe it or take ownership or something.
And it's really obvious that that's afterwards. Those commentaries come after the fact. Yeah.
So then a maybe final question I have with this is, again, this is very recent. Again, it's surprising last couple of days, but something that I've noticed with it is, I don't know how else to describe it other than a sort of extreme discomfort or like distrust of when I'm here and I get pulled back into here. It's simultaneously, somehow it's clear that, okay, that there really isn't anything that needs to be done or that I'm doing, things are just happening. But at the same time, the pull to like, no, I have to plan, or I have to think ahead, or I have to do these things. Like, it's a really strong pull.
Yeah,
and just, even though I can see, no, everything will do itself or is doing itself, or so far every time I've tested it, it's fine. But I would have thought, maybe false expectation, that one clear scene, or maybe it hasn't been clear enough yet, it would just be convincing of, oh, okay, this is fine, I can relax. But it's not. It's really feeling uncomfortable.
Yep. Okay, two things come to mind. One is that the first thing that I thought was, this is just habit. This is just old habit. But if it constantly comes back, if it keeps on happening, then it's resting on something more fundamental, right? Okay. And that immediately brings up the concept of shadow work. That there's something deep in you that says, I have to be in control. And so that might be that would be some emotional thing held at a cellular level, if that's the case. So it could be either. It could just be a habit that keeps coming back, or it could be something deeper. Now, if it's a habit, generally by the time you've seen through it 2 or 3 times, it just won't be there anymore. But if it does keep coming back, then you need to look a lot deeper, to go into, so then you start the process of going into sensations and looking at the stories that are attached to them, and as you recognize them, they'll fade and change, and it reveal something deeper. So if, as you start looking, if you experience a fear response, then very likely there is something underneath that. Because fear usually sits on top of a big block to get there. So it could be something like terror that stops you from going down into that. And if you get through that, you're going to find shame. And if you get underneath shame, you're going to find guilt. And then you're going to find that was integrated into the body as a youngster, as a toddler, even, back at that level. That's pretty deep shadow stuff. But that's only the case if, seeing through it, and it keeps on coming back regardless of seeing through it.
Okay.
Yeah. And you need help to do that, yeah.
That's very helpful tips and things to look out for. Great, thank you.
That's my story anyway.
I will pull the rigor out of thought directly. Like you said a lot the word here, but I'm not sure that you are clear about what here means.
I'm not sure either. I can try to describe it better.
No, you need Myron.
Oh, good night.
You don't need to describe it. Just explore it a little bit.
Oh, I see.
Like
yeah.
like if you have with a friend, like you are with a friend in a park, sitting in a bench, and your friend pull out a computer and is putting some VR in the eyes, and is starting having a whole trip, and he starts screaming, "Where I am? Where I am? What do I do?" You obviously see where you are here. Nothing has changed, right? And he pull out the VR, and he will feel here. And he will put this, and he will maybe feel something else, but the here is the same.
Yes, yeah, that's
So
a great,
yeah, as long as you put a difference between where you are, right, what is here right now, what is here, what you mean by I'm lost in thought, you are giving too much credit to thought already.
Oh, I see.
And after you see, it's not a matter of being here, not being here. It's more a matter of taste and preference. When you see that if you are lost in thought or you're not lost in thought, it's the same here. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of preference. So because I'm guessing if you are lost in thought and it's pleasurable, you will keep going there. It's a problem because you don't like it. You see, so after it's just a matter of preference more than fighting with thoughts to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested to explore whether it's possible to never lose the recognition that I'm always here, even if getting lost in thought, let's say pleasurable thought, because yeah, as you said, you're right. Even when I'm lost in thought, everything is still happening here, but there might be no clear recognition of that in the moment.
Exactly, but you say here and that, and what is that? This is the interesting part. I encourage you to re-explore. What you say here, what do you really mean? I mean, in a room, in the world, in the universe, in the galaxy, in your brain, in a cell, in an imagination, in a computer, in a matrix. What do you mean? Because it doesn't mean anything really.
Wherever everything is appearing. That's the
I
weird
don't
thing.
know. I don't know.
It's not referenced
think
to
it's
some, yeah.
It's interesting. Explore it and see what happens.
Cool.
David, are you saying that we have a preference for thoughts even if they are uncomfortable or there is a resistance for them?
I don't know, but in this context, I'm just saying that when we are lost in thoughts, we do this for a purpose because we want to. because we are gaining something from doing that rather than doing something else, focusing something else. So there's many ways to work with this, and one way is to recognize that you never move. So being lost in thought, in quality value, is not better than feeling sensation. It's just you are just focusing on something else. It's a preference. And when you see it's a preference, you can start ask yourself, why do I prefer being lost in thought than feeling my body or feeling sensation or looking at the room? Why it's better? And then you, instead of fighting with thought, you are trying to understand why it's important for you to think about football or sex or money or whatever. And then you open the door to a more embracing exploration with thought. Make sense?
So, what would be the preference for worrying thoughts, for example?
Worrying thoughts? Like what?
Whatever, like thoughts that cause some anxiety or a worry.
But you see, you say thought, but you say anxiety, but anxiety is more a sensation. So now we are not speaking about the same thing right now.
You can easily presume that a worrying thought is to protect you and keep you away from a more worrying thought. That's a gross presumption, but it probably has validity.
Something that I've been noticing with this, which might be the same as what David's saying, might be different, but if I look at these, let's say worrying thoughts that are still very pulling, I would logically tell you I don't have a preference for worrying thoughts; they're unpleasant. But if I actually look into what changes if in one of those moments the recognition of coming back here happens, is that the thing that the thought was worried about isn't actually real. That can be very misconstrued or ambiguous. I can clarify, but there's sort of the thing it was protecting doesn't need to be protected or isn't real, or it's not actually what's here. And it's sort of realizing that what's here is primary and is fundamental, but is also not in danger or at risk by what's appearing here. And when that's clear, then the pull of the thoughts is much less or almost zero, because they're all describing things that aren't here. But there's an entire world built on those thoughts and those ideas and those objects. And so I'm finding now, and this is what I was saying earlier, that it's taken a lot of repeated exposure to slowly start to convince myself that, okay, that is all constructed.
I think, Casimir, what you are pointing to, it's a very basic mechanism of the body mind. It's when you feel a sensation that is uncomfortable or painful or is too much, you take refuge into the mind, into thoughts. At the beginning, it's not. At the beginning, it's very survival. Like if you cut yourself, thought will build. Okay, knife are dangerous. So it will start like very survival skill, which is normal. At some point, when you develop the conceptual dimension of thoughts, well, at this moment, the mechanisms keep going on. You see, like if I can protect you from a knife, I will protect you from anger, from sadness. So So now, when you feel some kind of anxiety, you instead of being with the sensation because you have never learned to be with it, so it's too much already, you will turn into the thought, to the thinking, which is analyze and is a problem solver. So it will make a problem, it will search for a problem, but it will only search in memories and in thinking, because it cannot seek somewhere else. So the problem is not the thinking. The problem, there's no problem, but the difficulty is to stay with what is uncomfortable in a somatic way.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting to sort of build on that is, let's say this thought comes up of how to solve the problem. I think what used to give that thought so much credibility or so much weight is the sense or belief that, okay, I have to solve this problem. You know, if I don't pay attention to this thought process, then I'm not going to solve the problem. And now starting to see, oh, no, I don't. Like, whatever's going to happen is it's just going to appear regardless. It completely frees up the attention to not be obligated to give itself to the thought, because I'm not actually the one who's going to make that problem solution be put into action or not.
Does it answer your question, Ramiz? Does it support you, what Casimir and I are sharing?
I don't know.
I remember at school and at college, when I was worried about coming exam, it was very probable that I would pass. If I was not worried, it was more probable that I would fail. So worry was protecting me from this feeling of failure.
What's your perspectives on what is the value of being with sensations?
Well, you ask the question like you have a choice. So funny.
No,
like
just
experience.
like experientially, like what seems to be the value of being with the sensations?
You're not with your thoughts, or less so.
I can say, just answering the question for myself, which might be a completely different answer from what, say, David or Vince would say. So there are more ways in which I can have thoughts about the visual field or about the future or things. I can also have thoughts about sensations, but it's usually clearer to me if I'm paying attention, or it's harder for me to pay attention to sensations and not be in this present moment here, which gets me closer to getting away from the thought stories or anything that's not actually what's here immediately happening. But I could imagine that for different people, different senses are more or less prone to that.
Casimir, when you and many others frequently get caught up in that catchphrase, which seems to have a lot of energy to it, lost in thought. If you were truly lost in thought, you wouldn't have the realization that you were just lost in thought. Do you see that?
I see it logically. I have to wait for it to happen experientially to see how, or experience how that. Yeah.
Well, if you, and what David was pointing to is you get lost, you're not here, you're always there. There's no such thing as lost in thought. Lost in thought is a thought, not a thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's just another thought. When you give it weight, it has no authority, is what I'm saying. In other words, there's a bird on the tree. Okay. Oh, I'm lost in thought. Ta-da! Wow,
Mhm.
I was lost in thought. There's no difference qualitatively. Lost in thought. I am lost in thought is just a thought, not a thing. There's no such thing as being lost in thought. They're just thoughts coming and going. Do you see? And I am lost in thought is just another in a series of thoughts coming and going, but it's no more important than any of the others.
So I think what we're referring to with lost in thought is not something you'll never have the thought, I am lost in thought. You can only ever have the thought, I was lost in thought after the fact. And what
Yeah.
you're referring to is that your focus was entirely on the subject matter of the thought. You were totally, your whole being was expressing the content of, and it's going to be a thought stream, not just a single thought, but basically you're lost in something. You're unaware of anything other than what that thought is about. That's I think what the reference is to when you say that. But nobody could say I am lost in thought because that's a contradiction. That's an oxymoron. It can't possibly happen.
Although I feel like there's middle ground, and this is kind of maybe related to this slightly different perspective I've found in the last couple of days that I'm still exploring, and maybe you can sort out, maybe I've got some confusion here. I can be having the thoughts, I am not able to bring attention to clearly recognize here. And so in that moment, when I'm having that thought, I'm completely aware of my thoughts, what's happening. I'm not lost in thought, but it's also, it just is different. It like, then when I'm able to then find it, I don't know how to describe it, but this, the perspective or sort of the not doing of, okay, there it is. It's just here. And my guess so far is when I'm having that thought of, I can't find it, attention or something, I don't know what, but it feels like attention is fully absorbed even in that thought. And it's rather it's absorbed in the thought space, even if the thoughts are fully describing the situation. And it's having to decouple attention out of thought and kind of, you know, dilate out.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
maneuver.
So what I would like you to explore what being here, being in the now, or however you want to term that, how do you recognize that you're in that state? And it would almost certainly be a sensation. There'll be a sensation that you go, ah, here it is. Some people might call it clarity. Some people might, whatever, however you describe it, the recognition that you're in that state will be because of a sensation.
Okay.
But explore that. Next time you go, because you do recognize it when you're there, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
And so explore how that recognition, what that
Okay.
recognition is referencing.
Okay, yeah, it's possible that I hadn't been explicitly realizing that that was part of the recognition, but that's a really useful thing to pay attention to.
And in a way, when you say, oh, well, I'm totally involved in my thoughts, even though I can see that when I'm not here, it's waiting for that sensation to turn up.
Yeah, okay.
Kashmir, one thing that came across when you were talking, it kind of feels like this new project you have that you're working with is really just a series of thoughts to keep you away from that space that you've recognized. And if you just drop that for now, where are you?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there's a lot of paradox around just dropping or letting go or not doing, and sort of how do you not do without efforting not doing? So yes, I think you're exactly correct. But it's
And you've just picked it up again. So let's put it down for a second.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's right
I
here.
I just saw that, so I just said I should share it with you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, good observation. Thank you.
I want to go back to what Ramis was saying because I had a huge wave of rage coming up because it's like in your question, my impression was I will go into sensation just if I see some kind of usefulness. Otherwise, I don't care about this thing called sensation somehow. So somehow convince me that it's good to go there and I have to do it. Otherwise, I will just, I don't know, I will not feel it. This was my impression, and the rage was about how long it took my own process to really enjoy sensation, just the joy to feel any part of your body as it is in the moment. It's just mind-blowing. And to add some kind of layers, I will use this to do something. It's a blasphemy. It's like eating an ice cream. You eat an ice cream because it's tasty. There's no reason. It's just it's amazing. You just take your ice cream, go to the beach, and you just enjoy it. And nothing else to do there. And sensing is the same, and perceiving is the same, and sound is the same. A lot of people listen music and everything, and I think this is one of the door. It's the door of seduction. Like thought is like Tabasco. And you love Tabasco. And when you taste anything else, you say, but why bother with rice? If I have Tabasco, I don't care about rice. But when you stop Tabasco and you taste rice, you taste different things that are very, very soft, and you start to enjoy it. After you taste Tabasco, it's like, okay, but it's too loud, too strong. There's no taste, no deepness. It's just like a huge wave, and after there's nothing left. But if you taste some very sweet things, or it's fruits, and just stay there, and it's changing, and it's beautiful. And I don't know, I'm going nowhere with this. I'm just wanted to share something.
David, thank you. Thank you, because now I understand why I get irritated by Vince saying thoughts are not useful. It's the same, because for me, thoughts are just pure enjoyment.
It wasn't my
David, what you're
intention to evaluate being in the sensation as benefit, like what I'm getting out of it. I enjoyed your answer. That's what I was looking for.
David, what you were describing reminds me of when Pernilla says the joy of experiencing, thinking less about what you are eating or smelling, seeing, sensing, and feeling into that you can get into a place where it doesn't matter what you are seeing, hearing, smelling, sensing in the body, that there can be a joy in all of those sensations, regardless of the content. I had Ramiz, your question about like at least what I remember interpreting your question of being like, what's the purpose of going into sensations of the body? For me, it was helpful early on, and it's still helpful now, to realize that there was a way to be that wasn't constantly thinking, and the body was somewhere else that my attention could go to help break that habit of like all of my other my senses would be active. I would be seeing things. I'd be hearing things. But if I were to maybe describe it as like the ratio of how much attention I was giving to my thinking versus how much I was giving my attention or my awareness to the other five senses. If I were to talk about it now, I would describe it as being completely out of whack, out of balance. Like 90% thinking, 10% of the rest split up between my five senses, unless there was something that happened in my senses that was more interesting or more stimulating.
Yeah, that brings us to something that somebody asked earlier. I don't remember who, but it doesn't matter. And that is what the value is, or rum is, I think. What was the value of direct experiencing? One of the things that we seem to be doing on this journey is reclaiming the body. We've been given so much emphasis to the mind from school, and whole of society tells us that we put thinking on a pedestal, and now by doing this, we're kind of reclaiming the body. Thinking does get useful again, Bianca, and I have no problems accepting that they can be extremely entertaining and therefore enjoyable. But yeah, useful.
You know,
that's another story.
no, Vince. To say that thinking is useful is equally enraging. It's just for fun, playing.
Yeah.
It's not for being useful or unuseful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a temporary thing. When I say that, I mean that it's a temporary thing for sure, because we get around to the point where we realize that everything is thinking. Even what we call sensations are thoughts. But that's later. It's just, yeah, but in the beginning, we've put thoughts on a pedestal. We've given so much emphasis to the mind that we've lost touch with the body. And so by doing this reclamation process and taking it back, we start to get a balance back, like Jeremy was saying. That starts to happen again.
I'd like to just explore something, and you triggered events when you said reclaiming the body, which I love. That was my body loved that statement, and it feels like I'm going to go against what I said to Kashmir a minute ago about putting down a story, but then I'm going back to what you said earlier, Vince, about when patterns or stories keep reoccurring, there's a deeper, maybe shadow work or trauma. So it's based on that. And it was triggered by Ramez's question about worrying thoughts, and then, what's the benefit of feeling sensations in the body around that? Because for a good portion of my life, I would have been considered a worrier. And then I would have went through a period of a lot of panic attacks and a lot of what I can see now was worrying thoughts, but then also sensations in the body that were with those thoughts to make physical manifestations happen, as in panic attacks or other issues. And I think an extreme form of it was my heart issue last December for 2 weeks, which hasn't returned. So even now, while worrying thoughts are less and physical sensations or panic attacks don't happen, there's still that identification with being a worrisome person manifests in my life in terms of pacing or worrying about the new job and what might happen. And so if I look at my circle of what thoughts I entertain as a conditioned being, there's a good chunk more than I'd like around worry, panic, that sort of stuff. And I'm wondering, trying to get under that to see what maybe from early childhood has triggered that. And at the same time, I'm thinking, well, maybe I have a belief that worrying is bad, which is part of the spectrum of all feelings, emotions, and thoughts. There's something there that I'm not seeing clearly, or I'm not getting under. Why do I worry? Why do I concern myself so much with things? And when Ramesh asked this question to me, I had gotten so far down to worry. Ultimately, it's I'm going to die. You know, whether it's someone might steal my car, I might lose my job. I think I've tracked it back to I'm going to die. That's like a source of it. But that maybe is just one level down, and maybe there's deeper levels underneath that I haven't got to. And I'm aware that that's a story, and Kashmir should come in and say, drop that now and see where you are. And I'm fine, but then it comes back and it comes back and it comes back.
Yeah, so I would approach that by saying it may well be that currently it's habitual, but that kind of begs the question, right, of why it's there. You know, there is, as David was saying, there is going to be some benefit from that, and I would usually approach that by saying that benefit is to avoid something a lot more serious, a much bigger worry, or even something worrying is a bit trivial compared to being afraid or being in terror. So that's possibly the worrying keeps you away from that. But I would go back to, where did it start? Where did this trend start? If it's part of your personality, it's something that you picked up a long time ago and it became ingrained.
Yeah, I think, okay, I had an initial memory of walking up to the front door of the house and wondering, is it safe? But that wasn't, when you said terror, it took me right back to when I was probably 11, maybe 12, something around that age. And I was in bed and I thought, back at the time, I thought the experience was, oh my God, the devil has me. I was in a sort of a black, empty space of nothing. And the interpretation was the devil has me. And I was terrified. I was frozen. I was like, I'm either going to die right now or I have to get out of here. And I remember jumping up and going into my sister's and kind of being all upset and stuff. So I've interpreted that looking back was some sort of a dip into emptiness, presence, whatever. But that was terrifying. That said, did that shape me throughout the rest of my life to be prone to worrying and have panic attacks and everything that goes along with that, the sense of how debilitating it is and who I'd be if I didn't have those things. So yeah,
okay. But even that wasn't the beginning. You know, that it would have been in you from even earlier than that. That was just a manifestation of it, you know. So you say the devil, but that's absolutely the monster under the bed, you know. And the fact that you could get out of bed and go to your sister's was pretty good, because you know, frequently, especially at a more primal level, we would just be frozen, like in a dream where we can't move. We would have dream paralysis and be unable to escape that horror that is chasing us. So I would say that was a memory you've got, and that was a manifestation of it. But the actual beginning of it was even before that, probably considerably before that. So one of the question comes to mind here when you say the devil. I'm thinking, okay, have we got? Were you in a religious household?
It wouldn't have been overly religious. It would have been religious in the sense of the way Ireland was with Catholicism back then, going to church Sundays, doing rosary. So there would have been a certain amount on my mom's side, not my dad. Not overly. I'm trying to remember.
So you may not have got it from your family. You may have got it from Church and so on. I mean, Catholicism, and this is a broad brush I'm using here. It's an incredibly violent religion. I mean, they threaten you with hell if you don't conform exactly. So
Oh yeah, totally
yeah,
agree. Yeah, and it's funny, we've a new scandal in Ireland at the minute about how the nuns and the brothers treated children, and it's the next big thing after the
yeah,
abuse. So it's another one that's coming out. But yeah, there was always that, maybe from very young, the fear of hell and damnation and all that. That's
yeah.
bred
They'll
into
put
you
that
before
into
you
you
know who
when
you
you,
are.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You're 3 or 4 years
Um,
old, and they're putting it into you. And of course, at that stage, you don't have any perspective. You take it literally when they talk about, that they're kind of metaphorically referring to the devil and so on. And but as a 3 or 4, 5 year old, you're taking it literally. You're actually imagining that there's a real person running around with horns and a tail, and he's going to get you or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think they were saying it literally too. They weren't just trying to be philosophical about it. The people who were running the country, this country was run by the religious Catholicism for a good 100 years. But yeah, yeah, I never thought it could be just the religious conditioning from a very young age. But there was always that tone of religion and fear, and then there was times when people in the area were doing the Ouija boards and kids were playing with it, messing with it, and that was part of it that I found very frightening. That you could be,
yeah.
possessed,
Makes it
the,
more
the
real, doesn't it? Yeah.
demons, all that sort of scary stuff. Yeah, and I notice as I'm talking about it and sharing it, I'm getting like the body is very shaky and agitated, and there's an energy there.
Yeah. Well, it tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm just not sure how to work with it. Or
Oh, you don't know, no, you don't need to do anything with it. Don't, no, just recognizing it, just being aware of that. You at a subtle level will have a feeling about how deep this stuff is. Just where it is and how it has shaped you. And that's all it takes to change it, is just that recognition of it, of its existence and so on. Yeah. I mean, the Catholic Church said, give me a young child. I know these are my paraphrasing, but give me a young child and I'll have him forever, and it's because they're full on into the conditioning, aren't they? The brainwashing, if you want to put it that way, goes on,
yeah,
and the discipline involved, and the nuns in particular were pretty cruel in the way they disciplined young kids.
yeah, yeah. And that's actually funny because I was driving down today. We were going somewhere, and I was going with my dad to show him horses, and he was talking about this because it's on the radio over here all the time. Stories about how particular nuns were even more vicious than priests treated children. Like the stories that break your heart. People talking about a 6-year-old girl was made slap her 4-year-old brother in the face by the nun, and just the things that went on would make you cry. I was listening to it one day. It was going on for 2 weeks. I only listened to a half an hour, and I was nearly crying just listening to the stories. But he was talking about and he had a lot of venom in him. He hated the priests. He hated the nuns from a kid, and I could feel myself tightening with his energy, and then noticing I didn't need to do that, and relaxing and just talking and changing the subject sometimes. But he was caught in this sort of loop of, but that's how deep it runs in people when the behavior and the treatment of people is so young.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
and
there's
amazing
definitely
how
a
it affects a
connection.
whole country. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't need to look for the bolt cutters, you just by recognizing that this stuff is there and has an influence. So when you first started to talk about it, you were kind of discounting the seriousness of it a bit. You were talking like it was so normal that it was hardly noticeable, right? And now you've got in touch with the the depth of it, the how much influence it's had on your whole culture. That's just, it shapes every person, every single person that lives in that, it gets shaped by it. And you recognize that depth now that even 10 minutes ago you were kind of saying, oh, well, it's just normal, you know?
Yeah, I think I spiritualized it as a sort of a spiritual event when I was young, touching into some deep presence. And maybe that could be the way it was looked at. But in that moment, as a 11-year-old, I was dead. I was going to be dead if I didn't jump out of that bed for whatever something had got me. Yeah. And even as I'm talking about it and sharing it now, like the body is just all shaky and agitated, and it's
Well,
like
that's the
I've just
thing
come out of
too.
a building that's being bombed.
Yeah, as well, it's like that. Absolutely, exactly the same kind of, you know, PTSD comes out of it. You know, yeah. Forgot what I was going to say.
And I suppose I don't need that because I'm trying to look for the focal moment or the point when I was 6 when someone said, like, I probably won't find it, but to know generally that through that conditioning somewhere, the shit was scared out of me, terrified at some point, probably
Yep.
numerous times where it froze in the body.
Yep, and it's not just what went in there either. You know, I mean, they were telling you these things in order to try and control you, but as a young kid and younger than 12, certainly, you know, as a say under 5 or 6 years old, anything less than that, uh, you you're going to believe to the point where you adopt an actual belief that you are wrong, that there's something wrong with you, right? Because it's so anti-humanistic that, you know, every part of your intuition tells you that what's right, and then you're getting all of this influence that's telling you, no, that's all wrong. You've got to be this way. And so, you know, you've got to learn to distrust your instincts, distrust what you know is right, which is love and spontaneity and authenticity and openness. That's what you want. That's what everybody wants. That's the basic human nature. Right? But, you know, you're told that if you don't behave in this way, you're going to go to hell. And that constant doesn't no respite. That's all around you in society as well as from the nuns and the priests.
Yeah,
And
because it's funny.
even your father's hate of it because of his experience, that also affects you as well.
But that's what I was just going to say. That's obviously had an effect, that the treatment of people, particularly in Ireland, if you weren't like middle class farming or wealthy, the working class, and my dad would have been in that group, and his parents, because they worked on farms, would have been classed as pure scum by the priests and the nuns. Like, he tells stories about the nuns talking to children in the class that came from respectable families, but other kids were just literally battered, beaten. You know, you weren't talked to, and so that obviously some of that passed through to me on that cellular level of some sort.
Absolutely,
kind of
yeah, that's a big
the
thing.
mistreatment.
You do take it in the body, you know, because the only way you can protect yourself from that kind of stuff is to dissociate, and so that's when it becomes ingrained into at a cellular level. And so it's not a mental thing by any means after that. You know, it becomes a body thing.
Yeah.
The others are not really.
And
Dennis, I'm going to put my Dennis hat on for a moment, because I've seen you do this somewhat frequently with other people. You'd mentioned a moment ago that you could feel in the body some of the sensations that arose from telling the story, thinking about it. Can you feel into that? right now.
Oh,
And
yeah,
accept it, give
yeah,
it compassion and love, and the things that you couldn't do with those same sensations that might have arisen when you were 11 years old.
yeah. No, that's it. As Vince was talking to me, like the body was shaking, reacting to the sense in the body, and I was feeling it all, and it just reminded me of like something's thawed out a little bit or is melting, and like maybe when I was 5, that I couldn't process it and be fearful and shake, that it just got frozen. So it feels like now there's a thawing out and releasing, and the body is expressing sensations and energies, and I am with them, and I'm fine. It's just interesting because I never expected it to be kind of triggered like this, or it's a release.
Yeah. And it just takes seeing it to let it go.
Would you really help, Vince, with your perspective? Because I didn't have your perspective or that perspective of, I wouldn't say I trivialized it because I did think it was an event, but it was quite I suppose it was quite a serious enough event, is what I'm hearing. And I'm feeling it now.
And something that a really good thing. So I have a lot of respect for this thing called hypnosis, just because I was a hypnotherapist for 5 years, and anyway, so I don't distinguish between hypnosis and meditation and imagination. They all kind of run together and have a thing. And there's a thing that I just use all the time that really works well. And so what I would love you to do is to use your imagination to go back to young Dennis. Really, the younger you can find him, the better. And you sit down beside him, and you sit so close to him that you're touching him. So you're and you can put your arm around him, you can hug him, and you need to explain, not in words, and this is a tricky part. You're not going to use words, although you will use words, but it'll be your tone of voice and what you're saying, and you'll explain to him that it's not his fault. None of it is his fault. He's not to blame for anything. It was the circumstances in which he found himself that was what was the prime activator of all of this stuff. And you're going to love him and explain to him that he was innocent and affected by this, and when he wait until he relaxes and leans into you, and then you'll pick him up and carry him back to the present, back to now, and integrate him into you. And then there won't be that pull back to that trauma anymore, because you'll bring him into the present. But you gotta stay with him and love him and hug him and explain to him that none of it was his fault. No blame anywhere. It was just circumstances that created this situation. And then when he gets that, you bring him back to the present, and then it'll be all over.
Yeah, I'm feeling the emotion and love from that.
Makes me want to cry.
Is it possible to do that without visual imagination? Because I have aphantasia, I can't visualize myself as a child. It's
Yeah,
not
no,
possible.
it's all about the feeling. It's all about that open-hearted intent. Yeah, so whether it's visual or however you imagine it, doesn't matter. When I say love, hug, be compassionate, be empathic, do all of that. That's all feeling stuff. That's what you need to take back and then bring him forward with you into the present in that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. While I use imagery to evoke, it's all about the feelings, the sensations, the love. Because without all that, it's just imagery and it's useless. It's the sensations, the feelings, love, however they manifest in you, or however you're able to trigger them. Yeah, I can see him clearly, Vince, because I have my earliest memory of being like maybe 2 or 2.5 or something like that, and I'm outside looking up at the flats we lived in with a coat on me, and it's like I came online and I was like, it's tiny, so I can see myself very clearly.
I'm reminded again of the question that you asked, Ramiz, about what point is there to feel into the body. From my perspective, there's some skill to it, and when you can practice feeling into the body, become aware of different parts of the body, different sensations, different, I don't know, different dimensions of sensation, then when there is either a situation that's happening now or a memory that you're having similar to what Dennis was just describing, and there are sensations in the body, old me wouldn't have been able to know that those sensations were there. I wouldn't have been aware that these things were actually arising. But having practice feeling into the body, I think it all started for me with the, what's it called? It's like a body scan where you start with your toes and you go like from your big toe to your second. You spend like 20 minutes just trying to really get very precise locations in the body and feel into what sensations exist. That's maybe this is just how I'm telling the story now, looking back, but it seemed to do it a lot to help me become aware of sensations that were arising in emotionally charged situations.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I would see it like my spiritual search when someone asks me what are you searching for, and it's peace. And when I go more and more into the body, and it's like you said, I used to do that scanning and yoga and just all sorts of things to kind of get into the body. But when you find yourself in the body, you'll know when you're in the body. It's just total peace. It's like that embodiment of you're unmovable, you're there, you're not in your mind worrying, it's like you're home. But then I imagine that the body is a body, but ultimately being fully in the body, there isn't really a body. That's just a concept. I don't know how to describe it. It's just your home. So it's worth doing if you're wondering.
Yeah, it's a Vipassana technique. And generally, my experience with Vipassana, which was fairly extensive before when I was a seeker, is that they'll start with what they call anapana, which is a breathing exercise where you simply watch the breath going in and out of your nostrils And then after a couple of moments, you actually look for the sensation of the air moving in and out of your nostrils, and you look for a spot on your upper lip just here that will feel the air passing over it. And you keep your focus on that spot, watching the sensations of the air. As it comes in, it'll be cooler, and as it goes out, it'll be warmer. Watching the air in and out of your nostrils. Do that for like 5 minutes or so, and then start scanning the body from they would start from the tip of the head and work down through to the feet, to the soles of the feet, and then back up, and then back down, and just up and down the body, looking for any sensations that are there, and then just recognizing the sensations, and then moving on to the next part of the body, looking for any sensations. And you do that for an hour, but you do it for an hour, have a 10-minute break, and do it for another hour, and do that all day from 4:30 in the morning until 9 p.m. at night, with a break for lunch, but no evening meal, and then you go to sleep and do it again, and you do that for 10 days in a row, and pretty amazing stuff that happens with that. But yeah, that's that same process of reclaiming the body, making the body alive again in a way that it hasn't been. Yeah.
Vince, you just reminded me of, there was a guided meditation that I did once where they got so precise that they were asking, like, feel the point on your big toe where your toenail meets the skin. And I was, it was so surreal that I could actually feel that. And outside of, I don't know, maybe stubbing my toe or trimming my nail. And they were even describing like there's this like memory in your big toe of it being stubbed, and how there's like this sensitivity there. And then they were comparing it with the sensations in your other toes that typically don't have that same sort of precise ability to sense the same thing. It was just, I can't do it. I'm not doing it justice right now, but it was fascinating how very precise they got as they went through the body, feeling into places that I don't know that I'd ever consciously
Yes,
tried to
that's right.
feel.
You discover things you didn't even know existed. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about something. I think for me it's back to therapy and shadow work. Because what I was saying about my father, I think that I fear becoming like my father. And the problem is I'm already like my father. It's like Dennis was saying about this possession by a demon. And I think it's also on psychological level. It's fear of being possessed by a shadow, losing control completely.
what comes to mind, Bianca, is not that you were like your father, and I'm not disputing what you say, but I'm suggesting that what the thing that links you and your father together in it at this emotional level is your judgment of your father and the same judgment you have of yourself. For that reason, that's the judgment that is what is like. Right? The actual details are probably way less similar than you imagine, but regardless, it's that overall judgment that is what is the same. And when I'm judgment's not the right word. It is a judgment, but it's not because it's too gross a word to 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 encompass the subtlety of that it is more that he doesn't fit your image of what a good parent is. But that's not what you think of, how you think of yourself. Do you have kids? No.
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 So
No.
it's not about being a good
Yes,
parent. It's
about being
about being a human at
yes,
all.
yes. But you did say once that he wasn't a good parent for that reason. But yes, okay. So and what I remember you saying was it was because he was weak. He was no, well,
It's
not adult, not immature. He didn't say immature,
well,
did you?
uh, he was not comfortable with himself.
Yes.
Maybe in a way like a teenager is not comfortable
Yeah.
with himself.
Yep. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And he was trying to appear, but he was bad at it. It's like when someone is trying to be cool,
Yes.
but he doesn't know
Yeah. Yeah.
how
What cool
being
is.
cool,
Yeah.
and it turns into a parody of
Yes.
being cool.
Right.
And with my father, it was like a parody of being comfortable with himself.
Yes. And would that also fit you yourself? Would that be your description of yourself?
I'm afraid so.
Oh, don't be afraid, but yeah, okay. Um, yeah, see, that's interesting because I never took you that way. I always saw you as a very serious person who was very much uh, in control, I guess, how I would say it. And then you say, no, I'm not like this at all. I'm quite different, you know. So how you appear to others and how you see
maybe
yourself.
maybe I am a bit better at pretending
Yeah, not such a
than my
parody,
father.
eh? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. But the interesting thing with your opinion of your father is the scorn that you have uh, for that. Right? You don't have compassion that he is just a conditioned being and that he never learned self-confidence because of the conditions that he was brought up in. You have scorn for it, and I guess you also have scorn for yourself. Uh,
Yes, and it's funny because he was always blaming someone else for how he is.
Right.
And I am doing exactly the same. It's all his fault.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. But you see it, and he never could see it, could he?
Mhm.
There's a big difference there, huge difference there. But yeah, it's very human to do that. That's what we all learn to do, is blame anything other than ourselves for all of the pain that we experience. It's always somebody or something other than us that's the reason for that. That's so human. Yeah. So can you see at an intellectual level, at least, that he didn't choose to be the way he is? That's just how he developed because of the circumstances in which he.
Yes, he had very harsh upbringing. And his father had even worse upbringing and it goes
Yeah,
on
of
back and
course.
back, yes.
Yeah, generations of it, and a lot of that, and I imagine, I don't know how accurate it is, but I am imagining that part of the world was a very dehumanized 2 generations ago. That was, on the wrong side of the wall, and there was a lot of, oh, we didn't allow emotions to be involved at all back then, eh? So I can imagine your grandfather had a very mechanistic upbringing.
I, I wouldn't blame it on part of the world. My other grandfather
Yep, sure.
also had a very harsh childhood,
Yep,
but
but he wasn't
he
like that.
was
Yeah,
he was the kindest man I knew.
yeah. Of course, there are variations from one extreme to the other in everywhere. Yeah, but so it doesn't remove that the circumstances in which they were brought up played a huge part in that. So, but of course, the starting point is the DNA. The starting point is the way he's built. The starting point would be uh, the 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 nature of the organism. So it's easy to see that one person uh, is influenced one way by their conditions, and another person is able to weather it a lot better for some reason. That's again just the difference in people. But
There are just innumerable conditions.
yeah, sure, yeah. So it's not a matter of blaming that or um, giving that too much credibility, but it's your derision of your father and yourself, that scorn that I find interesting. That it's like that's based on a fantasy that he had a choice and he could change, or that you have a choice and you could change. That's 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 a fantasy, as I see it.
But it's not about the choice.
So
It's
then,
like a tool that is broken.
yeah, okay, yeah,
It's not the fault of the tool, or it wasn't the choice of the tool,
yes, yeah, I get that.
but
Yeah,
it's useless.
yeah. Oh, you could use it as a door prop. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. You can't use it for the purpose that it was made for anymore. So what do you do with such a tool? You throw it out, I guess. Which of course isn't. Could you throw out? You can't. You can't throw out your father. You can't throw out the influence he's had on your life. You can't throw out the past. It is what it is. What it is.
Yes, he's in me and nothing I can do about it.
Absolutely.
When you realized the similarity between you and your dad, did that affect your feelings toward him or toward yourself in any way?
Well, at first, it it went towards blaming. Yes, but I inherited this from him.
How do you feel about yourself being like him?
Okay. How do you say, contrary to I'm lucky? No, I'm unlucky.
Unlucky, yeah. And Bianca, just to borrow a tool from what Vince said to me earlier, I don't know if it would be of any help because I can resonate with my father and what you're saying. Can you imagine your dad as a little 5-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old and all the challenges, things he had, and growing up to be a young man and then an older man having children and trying to cope? Can you imagine him like that? And maybe in doing that, something softens and there's an opportunity to love the good parts of him.
What comes up? It would be better for you to not be born at all.
That sounds like more you're telling yourself that than your dad.
Both.
That sounded to me like it was expressing deep pain. Better to be not born at all, either you or your father. So would you say that your father lives with deep pain?
Yes, a lot of guilt and shame. So much.
Yep, yep. And would you say that yours is equally big?
No, he got it worse, much worse.
Yep, yep. But even the amount that you inherited, even the amount, the lesser amount that you got, still covers some pretty deep stuff, eh?
Mhm.
Mm. And it's what your body's telling you right now. Mm. Don't go closer. Just go to the edge of it. Don't go right into it. Just at the edge is all you need, and then just back off and keep it at just a slightly uncomfortable level, because it's just, even that lesser amount is still overwhelming.
Like I don't even know if it's my pain or his pain
No,
that I'm
no, there's
feeling.
no distinguishing.
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it doesn't matter either.
he got unlucky. I could have got as unlucky as he
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. And you too were unlucky, to be his
Mhm.
child. Yeah. And I hesitate to say this, but in that unluckiness, there is some incredible luck as well that you probably don't see at the moment, but one day you will.
Yeah. I am glad that I am able to look into it.
Yes, that's where the luck is. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I imagine, Bianca, even if your dad didn't express it, that he felt very lucky to have you.
Yes, he does. And I don't want to harm him.
No.
I don't he talks with me and he says, I'm so much calmer when I talk with you. I'm not calm, but
Mm.
I'm glad that I can give him some relief.
Yeah.
Can you imagine yourself hugging him?
Yeah.
That's a yes.
That was telling. That was telling. Oh.
But just to be clear, Bianca, the work you're doing now is helping him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just to Bianca, I just wanted to say another thing that came to mind. Watching you the last while, it feels very courageous, and the word that comes up is you're a real warrior in your search for peace and truth and clarity. And I can only conclude you must have come from a line of warriors. And I'm reminded of The Godfather with the wartime conciliary versus peacetime one. And sometimes people in different times, they can look out of place, but in another time or in a wartime, they can be very much in place for what's needed. So I don't know if that helps.
I also was struggling with accepting or feeling the hate and the anger toward my father, and the fact that you are comfortable like, feeling that is something I'm just starting to feel, allow myself to feel the hate or the anger. I felt shame for actually feeling hate or that kind of rejection or
But that's a process too. So that, you know, in before you felt shame, and then now it's much cleaner, that other feeling. But that will also change. That will each time you see clearly what it is. Each time you accept what it is that you're feeling without a judgment or an opinion about it, it will morph into something else. And so you kind of like sink down into a deeper and deeper level and a different level of clarity about what it actually is. And then the details become more obvious. So it's not, you know, when you say hate, it's a kind of a general overall term that evokes a kind of a feeling. But when you start to get comfortable with it, you look at it and it becomes something a little different. And the more you look at it, the more different it becomes. You know, you see details that the original label just covered up. Yeah. It is what it is, what it is. That's such a big one. And just accepting whatever is there without the moment you describe it, you're kind of changing it. So just trying to accept it or looking to accept it without an opinion is such a huge thing, and that's where how it can morph into something better.
It
And Rama,
can it can take time.
Oh, yeah.
It it will decades. I was going with this hate,
Mm,
and I didn't even know why is it that.
yeah. And time weirdly as we describe it, it's not linear. It can speed up and slow down in our experience. So decades from the beginning look like a long way, and from the other end look like a short way. And things can change really fast or seem not to at all. Yeah, that
Just
thing
to
that
add to the point Rama has made a minute ago about speaking of father and, hating and rejecting but then feeling guilty or the resistance to feel that, or maybe ungrateful. What I noticed was there could also be a hidden, well, if I can fully hate or reject somebody like that, then I can be fully hated and rejected. And that's scary too. I think it's connected to a willingness to be alone and not rely on others, whether it's physically, financially, emotionally.
as soon as you say that, my mind immediately goes to, what does that mean? Rely on others, and I have stories about others, but I'm looking at what rely on means, and then the question comes: rely on them for something? What does it mean to rely on? This is just the way my mind works, so I immediately start going, what is this relying on? And
Expectation.
it's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Well, what came up for me was, particularly with parents or a father, that they're the head of the family and you don't have to be the head of whatever because they're there. And when they're not there, then it's you. It's back to this sort of standing on your own 2 feet, growing up, being responsible, and not kind of codependency with others, particularly family, parents. You set yourself free and then you set them free at the same time. I always find it useful these days to look at people and just imagine they're all 8 years old or 6 years old or 12 years old. These big older men or older women. Everyone's just a
Which
child inside a body.
they mostly are, absolutely. Oh wow! I had a revelation. Part of my childhood was, I don't know from what age, but uh, I just felt so constricted by the rules, just the rules in the house and the rules of society, that I really look forward to being 18 and being at that age. I thought I'll be able to be independent. I won't have to obey the rules anymore. And then when I got to 18, that didn't happen, and I thought, oh, it must happen at 21. Must be when I get to 21, I'm an adult. And then I got to 21 and I thought, bloody hell, I've been duped. They're all fucking kids. There are no adults in the room. Nowhere.
Yeah.
That was, I remember that clearly. That was, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe, Bianca, your expectations about being an adult is that nobody knows how to be an adult because there are none around anywhere.
I believe they are just very, very rare.
Yeah.
How's things for you these days, Yvonne?
I'm just so tired. Yeah, it's challenging, very challenging. And but I meet myself all the time. Every time I'm triggered.
Yeah. Your usual sparkle seems to be missing today. You look tired.
I'm very tired. Yes, I've I've been doing too much cleaning because I'm going back to England for hospital appointments on Wednesday. So I'm just trying to.
So you're pushing yourself.
I'm afraid I am, but it's the only way, in a way, to get things okay. I feel bad leaving him. I'm in the other house now because after my baptism of maggots, I've been sleeping on the sofa, and then I bought a camp bed. Yeah, just trying to get it organized for him for when I'm not there, because I would be away for about 2 months. And yeah,
Well, you know
I've been
you're going to come back to a mess, don't you?
oh no, but not 2 years of it.
No.
Not
Okay.
2 years. It'd be 2 months. That's a big difference. Yeah, I was doing a meditation earlier where I met myself. I mean, when I came home
Yes.
to
Yeah.
met myself, and I found myself to be quite quite almost flat. Not bubbly and effervescent.
Mm.
Quite not in fact, almost I met like a hidden depression almost. But that was yesterday. Today it's not here. But more and more that I come back down here to be totally present and stay here, everything's quieter. I mean, I do exude, I can't, if that's the word, exuberate now and then, but yeah, it's flatter. But I
Would you
did want
say
to.
that's also karma? Would it be karma as well? Would that be a word that fits?
Yeah, it definitely karma.
And quieter?
Yeah, for the time being, yeah. And also sad at myself being so reactive and sad at. Oops, I'm trying to get your face while I'm talking. Sad at at the amount of times I've been triggered and reacted and not waited and felt out the trigger, but expressed, had an reaction. And then in the reaction, I was like, here's the reaction. And so much energy it takes, the reaction.
I bet you're seeing it. This is pretty brilliant.
Yeah, I suppose it could be called that. It just makes me feel sad that I had to come back into the relationship, to realize what is still here that hasn't been looked at, what is still. But it was interesting listening, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Bianca, sorry, Bianca. I was just very, very moved by I experienced a strange sadness when she mentioned how she felt. Was it disgust or a horror or disgust by the thought of hugging her father? And I remember having the same thing with my mother. I felt compassion and love for her, but when she came to hug me, I would feel like disgust almost. I didn't want to, and I felt disgust in her and in me. And each time I went to see her, I wanted to experience this more and more to see what's going on. But it took her to die before that disgust turned into such sadness and compassion and love. And I had a dream after she died, and she came to me and hugged me, and I hugged her. And then as we hugged, she just entered into my body. And it was beautiful. And I think I might have mentioned before, because now when people say, you're just like your mother. And before I would have said, oh, God, I'm not like my mother. But now I say, good, wonderful. I love my mum. And it's like it's taken her to die for me to just accept and take in everything that I found disgusting or not on. I didn't find it disgusting, but there was a certain something of that when she.
I get it. Yeah.
But other things that really triggered me in her, and I knew that they were all in me, and I was carrying this same bag of stuff that she'd probably handed to me like her mother handed it to her. I think I call it the mother's lot. And it's a bag of stuff. And it's had to be the word leaves me, but when you burn it to transform it to be just the word I can't, it's just left me. you know,
Transmuted.
well, you know, when you turn metal into gold. What's the
Alchemy.
word? Alchemy. It's an alchemical, yeah, energetic thing that happens. It's just turned to love. Everything of it is turned to love. And it just very much reminded me of that. And I wanted to say something to you. Bianca, I wanted to say something about that because there's so much love in there. But we don't see it as that at the time. And it's sad it took my mum to die before it transformed and I saw it and felt it. Anyway, that's...
Yeah, I became friends with my father after he died. Did not happen while he was alive, but after he died, I became friends with him. But I don't feel sad about that. I was privileged. Yeah.
When I say sadness, I find there's two kinds of sadness. There's a sadness that's got history, but there's a sadness that's very pure and beautiful, and it transforms to love. So, you know, I had a teacher for 30 years, and he always used to say, sadness is the train to love. And I do sadness without, pure sadness without history goes straight to the heart. That's been my experience.
Yes, the sadness with history is grief.
Yeah. Yeah, the story of it. Yeah, it's not pure. It's just, yeah.
It's beautiful.
I just feel very moved. I was very moved by what you were saying about your father, everything, you know, because I recognized it as I experienced it myself. Yeah.
It takes a lot of time. There was a time when I wouldn't believe it can happen to me, but now maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's seeing all those things that you see in him within yourself. Otherwise, they wouldn't annoy you. You wouldn't dislike them so much, would you? So
yeah.
You triggered something, Yvonne, in me, and I just imagined Bianca, and instead of kind of saying, like, you know, Dad, I hate you. It's actually, Dad, I love you, and you hurt me. And that's a step closer to something.
Yeah.
More true, more vulnerable, more. Because when you say that, like, I hate him or I wish, you know, it just feels like it's love with something else. You hurt me.
Yep. When you say he says he's calmer when he's talking to you, and when you say something else you said, I've forgotten what it is now, I can feel the love you have for him, as well as the other stuff. They're not exclusive. It's not one or the other. They can both sit there, be together. Yeah.
I think it's just, I feel his pain.
Yes.
And it's like, I feel the pain that he doesn't want to feel.
Yeah.
It's too much for him. And yeah,
it is too much. It would break him.
Mm.
Yeah.
And yet we've kind of moved to a different place where now we are talking about we can cope with the breaking apart. I mean, we say it's too much for him, like it would break him. But we are now more able to be broken open, to be broken, and feel that brokenness and be with that. Because we've all evolved more in that way. I mean, our parents didn't have the psychological experience, and we've moved on more.
Yep, yeah, they didn't have a chance. That's true. The world is a different place.
Mm. Before they would say, don't get your heart broken. Now we would say, break your heart open.
Yeah. Let the love flow.
Feel it, feel the pain. Open, there's the doorway. Open. And it's like when you were saying, did you say disgust about hugging him? But there is the portal, there is the doorway, that disgust, that feeling of, whoa, there's a lot in there. It's not bad.
Thank you, Eva.
Bianca,
It really means a lot.
do you
Thank
feel
you
like it will?
Thank you for trigger. Not well. It's like a trigger. It was whoa. Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Bianca, do you feel it will break you also? Feeling the pain?
Oh, I don't know. I just now I feel there was some shift and I need to adjust. The world went upside down and oh, where am I?
Yeah, Ramez's point to me just will feeling it break you? To me, it's like not feeling it is breaking you. But anyway, I think you're feeling it.
Well, for me, it's like depressions is when I'm suppressing the feelings, suppressing, and then it all goes and I can't function anymore. That's depression for me. Yeah. So maybe just approaching it in a more steady way.
With love.
like you say, integration is important, and give it time to settle. How are you, Chenna?
I'm great. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Doing good. Yeah.
I wonder how is Louise with all this talk about parents.
Hi, Bianca. Got that lovely smile again. I was really feeling everything that you were talking about because I resonate too. And something at the end now, I know you want to kind of maybe just kind of settle on what's happened, but there was a realization, like my parents have always tried to protect me from that hurt. I think that's what they've always tried to protect me from, that hurting, because I think it's too painful. I recognize what you said about it's too painful for them, and they've always not talked about it, or they would talk amongst themselves, and I would always be left to imagining the worst. I would always imagine the worst when they had serious conversations. So instead of involving this child or teenager in conversations, they were always done quietly behind closed doors, and I imagined the worst. And I was just reflecting, as you said, that I think, as Yvonne said, like, we welcome the opportunity to be broken open. And I was just thinking that that's an amazing thing for me to realize, maybe for my children, is that, you know, I've seen recently that everybody has their own path, their own strength, wisdom. We're all, well, it's all one, it's all, you know, touching that strength here. I know that that's there for others as well. It's there for my parents, it's there for the children. And there's a bit of relief with that, actually. There's a bit of relief that I don't have to protect. Don't have to do that. Don't have to hide the difficulties of the world, of life, really. Like, you know, it's a different approach to
What our parents did.
Yeah, we don't talk about those things. Yeah. Even as an adult, they, you know, my mum's she's got cancer, and, you know, I have to, oh, I'm okay, and they don't tell me when they're going for, you know, meet the doctor. And, you know, I would like to be involved, I would like to, but I'm just seen as this child that needs to be protected, I think. But yeah, it's like, more and more I just see that I don't have to dip my fingers in other people's pies. They've actually got what they need. I mean, I'm not saying I don't help people, but I have a fear that when my parents die, that I will have big regrets. I know that's a fear. Yeah. think I'm learning how to. It's not about the physical being there. It's about something else. I think Yvonne was talking about that. It's that compassion, like even just accepting the way they are with the medical situation. You know, they'd rather not involve me. So it's cool. Yeah, it's gone blank.
Yeah, they're doing their best they're doing they're doing their best.
Yeah. Yeah, it took a while to see that. There's a lot of blame until I think, as Dennis said, when you look at the details, you know, you kind of gloss over. I was a child of a couple that got together for the first night, and you know, I was a product of that. And my mum was thrown out of the house. She was pregnant. She had to move away. My dad went overseas. I mean, you know, when you really look at the details, what was the nervous system is in a very, you know, frightened place.
Yeah.
And so I've done a bit of work around that, and there's been much more acceptance. And now I actually had a conversation. I actually asked my mum. I could actually ask her, you know, how did she feel? She didn't want to go into too much detail, but she told me some details about what she had to do, and she had no money, and she had to live with friends, and it's those so instead of that glossing over, I'm an unwanted child, and it was almost like a little bit of a badge, it was much more compassion. And you know, how would I feel? How would I cope with that? You know, she had nobody.
No.
Yeah.
Frightening for her.
Yeah.
And she wanted to protect her little baby, and she's been doing it ever since, protecting you from everything.
Yeah.
I just got the sense of you have a greater perspective now, and even in a playful way, what came to me was just to say to her, "How dare you keep me out of your life?" You know, that's so selfish. With her going through her cancer and her treatment, so you shock her out of her, "I'm protecting you." Now she's like, "Oh fuck, all right, yeah, okay."
Yeah. I do feel that dynamic is changing. It's now, there's a little bit of a shift towards me maybe having to do some of their looking after. But the other thing you talked about before is we were talking about this. I was quite surprised at how little time it took for that compassion and that warmth and that shift to happen. It didn't take years. It's been in the last few months, actually, doing some specific work around it. But, yeah, you kind of think that it would take another few years to undo all that, but yeah, it's quite amazing, really.
It's like dominoes. One thing rests on another thing, and when one goes, they often can all go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what Vince said that might help everybody give a bit of respite or short circuit the mind, that the reconciliation can happen before death or after death.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was only after my dad died that I recognized his innocence in the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Vince, would you say, I imagine that was, in one sense, quite painful, but yet freeing?
Say the last couple of words again.
I'm imagining that that recognition of his innocence could have been painful, but freeing as well.
Oh, but freeing. I didn't feel pain. That recognition was really a relief, a release, is what my experience was, and a huge softening that wasn't there before. He was my antagonist while most of the time while he was alive, and when I recognized how he was just a product of his own conditioning, that was a lot easier. But that didn't happen straight after he died. That took a while. I think yeah, it was interesting. He died in 1997, and I had bowel cancer in 1997. And it wasn't until 11, 12, 13, 14 years later I woke up. So I don't know exactly when I had that, I suppose you'd call it a reconciliation with him, but it doesn't matter. I don't remember when. No, there was definitely a release, and it was freeing, but it was, yeah, more sweet than painful.
Yeah, no, I said that wrong. I had my timeline wrong or something in my head. It was actually the release from the pain. Knowing the innocence is the release of the pain of
Yes,
yeah. I
yeah,
said
for
it
sure.
wrong. Yeah.
There's some really interesting dynamics there too. Um, when my mum died, which was considerably later, at that time, and partly because of the fact that she died and uh, other things. Anyway, my brother and I became estranged, and we had been really good friends most of our life, But yeah, at that point we became quite estranged, and I recognized that a lot of what I felt for my father, I felt for my brother as well. Yeah.
That's gone well now though, Vince, yeah.
No, nothing's happened really much. We did recently uh, exchange emails, and there was the intention to get together, but nothing's happened yet. So yeah, that'll be interesting. But yes, that's certainly that thinking of getting together with him stirs stuff in me for sure. Mm. And not pleasant stuff either. Mm.
Is that connected to your father?
Yes. Yeah. And it's weird. It's unexplainable. You know, that connection. Yeah.
So you softened to your father, but not to your brother, or how is the feeling
Yeah.
towards?
I don't. Yeah. No. I don't feel. I feel scared. I think probably would be the best way to put it. I feel scared towards about my getting together with my brother. But it's that the stories that come up are that he will treat me like my father treated me, kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah. Anyway, it's obvious that there's work to be done there, but we'll let life sort that
Well,
one
that's
out.
interesting. I mean, the scared is the doorway there.
Hmm.
Is it not? If
Sure.
that's what you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to therapy you.
I don't mind that, but yeah.
So what kind of a relationship did you have with your brother when you were children?
Oh, we were great mates. We were good mates. Yeah.
So strange that something altered.
Yep.
I think it'd be interesting to would he would he look into it with you? Would he be interested in investigating the feelings that are going on? Is he that kind of a person?
Um, no, I don't think
No.
so.
Oh, they're all very different then.
Yeah, yeah, which is kind of crazy in a way because we did share a lot of this stuff earlier on. Uh, He's a psychologist,
Wow.
but everybody else is an idiot from his perspective. At least that's the way I see it. So yeah,
You might be being harsh on him.
I probably am. Yeah, I probably am, and it's my defensiveness that's doing that. Yeah, yeah.
But you've changed so much, Vince, I imagine.
I have, but whether he'll see that's another story. I don't know.
But I imagine maybe there's an opportunity that, or a chance that he's changed as well.
Oh yeah, I imagine he has. Yeah, yeah. It'll be interesting, and I'm not certainly not against anything happening, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm kind of relieved at that.
What, having to wait to see?
Yes, yeah.
Mm. Is he the
But
only person in your life you have this feeling about?
yes, yeah.
Ah. Hmm. There's a lot of juice in there.
There is. There certainly is. Yes. Mm. And it will happen. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, now's not the time to do it. It's breakfast time.
Oh, what will you have? Poached eggs?
And I'm not doing poached eggs at the moment. Yeah.
And how's your hand?
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, it's
Good.
coming along. I can't
Good.
wait for the swelling to go down and for the cast to come off permanently. But that'll be
Oh,
another 5 or 6
yeah.
weeks. Yeah. Mm. All right,
It's been-
everybody.
Yeah, it's been, thank you, Vince, and thank you, everyone. It's been very nice. I'm sorry I fell asleep.
Oh, did
towards
you?
it.
I didn't notice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night,
See
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Night, night.
Bye.